Recording in progress. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brendan Hogan, Chair of the Public Works Commission, welcoming you all to this March meeting of our commission. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself.
Motion to approve.
All right. We have a motion from Commissioner Barr.
I'll second the motion to approve the agenda.
A second from Vice Chair O'Neill Ivanko. Director Spencer.
Yes, let's see. We did get a request for some edits from Commissioner Overby for the minutes. So maybe if I understand, the motion would be to approve the consent agenda with the draft minutes probably being moved to 4.01, just so that we can discuss those edits and then have a vote separately.
I can amend my motion to what you just said.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, another play would be to kick those to next month. I know the edits, I certainly haven't seen them. I know they came in this afternoon. Again, speak to what others afternoons and early evenings so far have been like. Our fellow commissioners may not have time to review those.
I'm amenable to that, to kicking them till next month.
Yeah, I am too. It did come in quite late. I was able to kind of glance over those edits and I was fine with them, but I also generally don't have the bandwidth at 4 in the afternoon.
Let me just add that we circulated those later than Commissioner Overby sent them in. So let me just make sure that I take the fault for that one. We should have circulated those earlier, but we'd also be able to bring those up on screen whenever those need to be deliberated on.
Sure.
Understood.
Okay.
So the motion is to accept the agenda with removal of the draft minutes of February 16th, pushing those till April.
Okay. Is that friendly to the seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, thank you. We'll go to a vote then. Commissioner Barr.
Aye.
Commissioner Bose.
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Vice Chair O'Neill Ivanko.
Aye.
Commissioner Overby.
Aye.
I for myself. The modified agenda here has passed 6-0. Thank you. Moving forward to public forum. I invite participants that wish to speak and just simply ask that you keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. We will, on the deliberative items later in the agenda, will open up a chance for public comment specific to those as well. But if there's general remarks or you don't have time to stay for the particular agenda items, you're welcome to speak at this time. Mr. Goulding, do we have signups in the room or online?
We do, yeah. For folks online, if you've joined us via Zoom, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. And it looks like a few folks have called in. So if you have called in and want to speak during public comment, please use *9. That will alert us that you wish to speak. For right now, we do have 2 people in queue in the room. So if the chair and the commissioner are ready, I let Scotia know that it's your opportunity to speak.
Well, thank you. I would like to speak on the item on the second agenda, so I don't know if this is too early. I understand that the homeless pods that they're planning on putting downtown, there were other locations. I would really appreciate it if you would list for me the 10 other locations that were being, the 9 other locations that were being considered for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have in the room with us, Mary.
Yes, I am also speaking about the pods that are going to be going into
onto Elmwood Avenue. I'm a small-time landlord. I rent 8 apartments on Monroe Street. We have a lot of problems in the neighborhood as it is with homeless people, people that are mentally challenged, who walk down the streets drinking publicly, urinating publicly, and I'm being overburdened by property taxes. And they're saying that property taxes, the property values are going to depreciate because we're in a district with a homeless community. I would like to know what's going to happen, how it's going to be supervised, how it's going to be enclosed, if there's going to be somebody on staff all the time. What are the cooking and bathroom privileges going to be like? I'm just very concerned that it's going to downgrade our neighborhood when it was just coming back up and becoming revitalized. It's going to go downhill again. I can't even walk through Battery Park without being confronted by homeless people sitting out there drinking, sleeping on park benches. Yeah, and you're just bringing them all up to the north end. And I would like to see you put that place with those pods somewhere else besides the old north end. There's enough problems. We don't need any more.
All right. Yeah, thank you for your remarks. There's a couple questions there. I'll make sure we'll circle back on those on the discussion item related to the shelter pods. Thank you. And I see one virtual hand in the air. So.
Up next in queue, Nicholas Pena.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, great. Yes, I would like to echo the comments that were just made. My name is Nick Pena. I'm also a landowner in the neighborhood, directly where these pods are proposed to be positioned. I'm speaking not just as a landowner, but as the steward of homes for close to 40 people. I've had numerous phone calls, and my property manager has had numerous phone calls for people expressing extreme disappointment, concern, and fear. We have several families that live in these buildings. Obviously, I have a vested interest, and I echo the comments that were made with regard to the value of properties and sort of what's going on in the community. But I also want to speak for the families and women and children that, this is a big public safety concern. From what I understand, this is a wet facility where drinking will be allowed. We all know that there will be drugs as well. I want to know what is going to be done from a safety perspective. I want to know why the community and the landowners were not notified before this. And I'd like to know what's going to be done in order to ameliorate this situation and make it safe and equitable for everyone.
Next in queue, we have Sharon Busher.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Whoops.
We could hear you. Looks like you may be muted again. Sure.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I have two separate comments. One is I call in frequently to voice concern or to make a comment that always isn't a positive, but I wanted to let the commission know I wanted to thank staff for their reaching out to the residents of East Avenue and the process that was undertaken for traffic calming and their willingness to have another meeting to discuss the process as it was laid out. So I wanted to let the commission know that staff was very responsive, and I want to thank them publicly for that. The second piece has to do with what was just talked about, the pods for the homeless. And I support this, but there is a zoning amendment going through planning, which talked about all of the aspects of being administratively approved, et cetera. And I brought up the fact that I didn't feel that there was in that zoning amendment any notification of the neighbors or the neighborhood where this site might be located. And then lo and behold, the next day it was identified that this parking lot had been chosen. I think it's unfortunate. I think that a meeting to hear from neighbors and to have people reassured would have helped allay some of the concerns raised, and maybe not all of them, but I think because we're fast tracking it, and I appreciate that because there's such a need, but I think that without having everything laid out, I think that this is the ramifications of that. This is what happens. People are frustrated, concerned, and because you own the parking lot, you're now hearing those concerns. So I'm hoping that if we identify other sites, we'll have a zoning amendment that will inform the public so we can do this better than we have this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, there's no one else signed up to speak during this public comment period.
All right, thank you, Mr. Golding.
It looks like somebody raised their hand in the room there.
I just had a question to you. Are we only allowed the one comment?
That's a question for the chair, but
Are we only allowed to have the one comment per segment?
Yeah, if you're interested in the shelter pod,
Okay.
we're trying to address your questions, and if there's something else, you can speak specifically to that item at that time.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, with that, see any other hands in the air? We'll close public forum and move to the consent agenda. A reminder that we've stricken 4A, and we are just looking at 4B on a North Street reallocation, 4C on Shelburne Street roundabout regulations, and 4D, a no parking zone on Overlake.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
We have a motion from Commissioner Barr. Thank you.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Bose. Thank you for that. Is there any discussion around that motion? All right, to a vote then. Commissioner Barr.
Trying to find my mute. Aye.
Got a thumbs up and a verbal aye. Noted. Commissioner Bose.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Aye.
Commissioner Overby.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Consent agenda is passed 6-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 5, Clean Water Resiliency Plan and Integrated Permit Update. Look for a staff presentation at this time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Chair Hogan. I have with me this evening Division Director Megan Moyer and a number of her team, Jenna Olson from Water Resources, Martin Lee from Water Resources. We're really excited to bring this presentation to you tonight, both what we have accomplished with the Clean Water Resiliency Plan since voters approved the 2018 bond, and the next phase of our water quality work through the integrated plan. And I won't spoil the thunder, but there's a lot of good work that's been done and will need to be done. Some of that will have a financial impact, and we want to engage you early and often in these conversations. So given that, I'll turn it over to Division Director Megan Moore.
Great, thanks, Chapin. Jenna, do you want to share, or do you want me to share the presentation and run it? we didn't figure that part out. I'm happy to
I'm
get it
sharing.
going. Okay. Is it, I don't see it yet.
Yes, hold on.
Okay. Great. So hi, everyone. Happy almost sort of spring. I don't know exactly what season we're in, but it certainly feels spring-like today. And we are really excited to talk to you about a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes. We will be talking some big numbers, but as Chapin said, we need to get those out and start talking about those, you know, especially given everything else that's in the city, happening in the city. Joining me is Jenna Olson, our Water Policy and Programs Manager, who's going to be talking to you specifically about the integrated planning piece and meeting some of our water quality goals. And then Martin Lee, who's one of our more senior water resources engineers, that's going to be talking to you specifically about the infrastructure work that we've been doing. Next slide. So I just wanted to take a quick step back and share with you sort of what our approach is with regard to, you know, some of our mission. There's a lot of stuff that we can't control in the environmental world, such as climate change, or at least that's not our primary mission. But there are some things that we are within our control, and that's really where we've been focusing our efforts. One of the primary threats to the lake is just simply aging wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. Not every single piece of equipment that fails will immediately result in a discharge of sewage, but it certainly makes our jobs harder and can contribute to that risk. And there are pieces that, as we know, have failed and have directly resulted in the closure of beaches and in discharge of partially or improperly treated sewage. Even if there's not a sewage discharge, the closure of streets, the interruption of service is something that we are keenly aware of. The other major threat that we are trying to tackle is the excess nutrients, specifically phosphorus from wastewater and stormwater. And we're doing that through our integrated planning process that Jenna will talk to you more about, and really looking at how we can implement phosphorus reductions that are mandated by the Lake Champlain cleanup plan. And the reason for this is that phosphorus is one of the things that drives the cyanobacteria blooms. And we know in 2021 was a pretty challenging year in which there was at least one day in which all of Burlington's beaches were closed, and we know that a number of them were closed throughout the summer. Next slide. While those other two things are certainly our primary goals, other things that we have been working on for decades and will continue to work on are tackling combined sewer overflows. We've done amazing amounts of work since 1990, but we still have the tippy top of the tree to grab to stop CSOs from happening on the frequent basis that they do still occur, particularly into the Pine Barge Canal. And we'll talk to you more about that. And then the other water quality goal that we haven't really talked a lot recently about is tackling the excess stormwater flows that run off impervious surface and end up causing major erosion, which can be a source of nutrients, but also just purely habitat impacts on some of our urban streams, namely Inglesby, Centennial Brook, and Potash Brook. Next slide. So hopefully we've referred to it a lot, the Clean Water Resiliency Plan. This plan came together rather quickly after we had those major challenges in 2018. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just only tackling the specific things that broke at the plant, but that we were using this as an opportunity to engage the community in starting to pay and starting to reinvest in our infrastructure, as well as to start doing this forward look, which is sort of bullets 5 and 7, which is the integrated planning, which is talking really about how do we make improvements. So a lot of the infrastructure stuff is how do we make sure we bolster our system so that we don't backslide. If the wastewater plants start failing, we will immediately start discharging more phosphorus than we already discharged potentially, and certainly untreated pollution. But how do we actually make things better? And as I think hopefully we all recall, in 2018, we did put together this sort of initial tranche of money that we knew we needed, $30 million. And we were very, very pleased that the community came out in droves to support us, and we had a 92% approval rating. So next slide. where are we at? What have we been doing with this money? We have already spent a great deal of the money. We've spent about $7 million. That $7 million was specifically on those systems that failed at the wastewater treatment plant. Just to orient you to the table, which has more detail, the purple items are things that specifically draw down our borrowing, our bonding authority. The things in yellow are sort of project development loans. The state does give us planning and design loans, which don't necessarily draw down your authority until such time that the project becomes a construction project. And so those are a lot of things that are happening that will get converted into design or construction projects later on. And then the items in green are items that we actually have received grant money for. And overall, by the end of 2022, we will have programmed over 80% of these funds, which is why we're starting the conversation about what's next. Next slide. One of the things that came up, certainly when we have asked for the bonding authority and asked to go to the voters, as well as when we've made other changes, other investments in our organization, such as adding staff. It was a joint goal of water resources as well as the council and I think the commission to make sure that while we are reinforcing our stewardship of water infrastructure, right, which necessarily requires more money, we need to make sure that people can afford that water and afford that wastewater service. And so we spent a fair amount of time with you, I think it was last spring, talking about our ratepayer affordability project and going through the various rate structure adjustments, which included the Lifeline rate tier, and which created a tier for the lower usage customers so that water was cheaper. It's sort of the life water, the water that most people generally need just to do their typical daily things. And then we also started setting up user class-based rates, which will enable us to, in any given year, keep water and wastewater services affordable for residential folks, but potentially look at the fact that commercial entities can put more of a burden on the system and thus could be charged a higher cost of service. We also have implemented a fixed fee waiver. So these are actual discounts for people who demonstrate that they are low income and are burdened, folks who are over 65 and attest that they would otherwise have challenge paying their water bill if they didn't have this program, as well as nonprofit and senior housing. And then we've also implemented sewer lateral inspection rebates and water sense fixture rebates. This is the early stage of the program. The other piece that we acknowledge, and we're going to be coming back hopefully by 2023, is that a lot of these features really help homeowners and not necessarily renters. And so that was sort of the missing piece that we acknowledged and we know we need to circle back to. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Martin, who's going to talk to you specifically about what's been going on in the sort of upper right-hand quadrant dealing with our aging wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. Martin?
Thanks, Megan. I'm Martin Lee, and let's talk about what we've completed to date. The cost background that Megan provided before was helpful, and I want to show you some pictures of what those projects entailed over the last couple of years. We really focused first on the systems that had failed, so we jumped right into design and construction soon after for disinfection, as well as some computer enhancements at the wastewater plants. So these photos here show what we did at the main wastewater plant, which is the largest and most complicated of the plants. At all three wastewater plants, we replaced tanks. So then the lower left, you can see the tanks at the main wastewater plant. We also replaced piping and pumps. So the lower right-hand corner shows the interior basement of the control room at the main wastewater plant. And the computer screens just depict an example of what the operators are able to see. The actual upgrade is throughout the whole plant at the main wastewater plant, what we call the SCADA system. Slide. Other work that we just completed this last fall is pump station work. Pump stations are typically at the lowest point in our collection system, and they pump or lift the water up to higher elevation so the wastewater can flow by gravity from that point. And they're critical because if they fail, we can have an uncontrolled discharge of wastewater. Here, the Flynn Ave pump station picture is the first one, and that's after surface restoration has been completed, and you can see the generator and control panel there. The Fletcher Place pump station picture is during construction, and I think it's a good coverage of that item. Slide. Now, what we're doing currently, work that started last fall and will continue through this year, is a comprehensive distribution and collection system project. So it's one of the largest in recent history here for our water, sewer, and stormwater work of this type for pipe rehabilitation, essentially. So approximately 7,600 feet of water pipe, which we've done similar scale in the past, but 48,000 feet of collection system is way above anything that we've done before. So that's pretty exciting. We have Granite Inliner as the contractor. The design was done in-house by DPW staff. Our resident engineer and project management is done by Dubois and King. And we have multiple funding sources: Clean Water State Revolving Fund, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, water bond proceeds, water capital, and paving capital. That also speaks, all these funding sources speak to the many team players involved in this project. Slide, please. So a lot of work, which is exciting, but we also want to point out that this is high impact in some locations. Some of the work that any of the water relining locations, any locations where we're digging and replacing sewer, and anywhere where we're doing full width paving, that's what we recognize as the highest impact work for this project, because that's longer duration, weeks or in some cases months, because water relining will be typically 2 to 3 months. And that work has advanced notification to customers, and we also we're working on broader outreach, as well as some locations such as at Home Ave, where there's a lot of industry really targeted outreach to those folks as well. So here I did list out on the slide where we're doing water relining, where we're doing sewer replacement, and where the full width paving is happening. Slide, please. So this is another aspect, the green stormwater infrastructure for the Clean Water Resiliency Plan. This is work that we've done, and we do have some more work lined up for this year. So in the pictures here in the south end, we have 15 stormwater gardens recently installed as part of the $1 million grant funding that we've captured. And this is above the Pine Street combined sewer overflow, so that we're pretty excited about that. The next round of green stormwater infrastructure work has design completed, so we are planning on implementing more green stormwater infrastructure this year in the Old North End. And slide, please. So last slide that I'm going to talk about for now is the other work that we have lined up for future that's more in the planning and design phase. So we're getting close on the next wastewater treatment plant work that's part of this clean water bond, and that's close to $12 million worth of work that includes some clarifier work, some grit handling, some screening, important updates to systems that are well past their useful life. I have pump stations listed here. We just completed construction, but now we're currently also in preliminary engineering phase for pump stations, and we're going to be pursuing the highest priority 3 to bring into final design and construction. We have additional green stormwater infrastructure work, and that's I previously mentioned that, so that's what we have under completed. The design is complete and will be occurring in the Old North End this year. The last item that I want to talk about is the stormwater outfalls, which we have a design complete for Manhattan Ave stormwater outfalls, which it will be a pretty large project that covers multiple stormwater outfalls below the Manhattan Drive area. And these projects are important for stabilizing slopes, preventing erosion, and we really are looking forward to getting these done. And beyond that construction, we're also looking at getting out there and assessing our 260 plus other outfalls and moving ahead on design with the 6 highest risk ones. Slide. I'll hand this over to Megan.
Thank you, Martin. Hopefully you guys are as excited as we are about all the work that's happening. I wanted just to kind of go through, I've been trying to figure out how to demonstrate that, one, we are moving the needle. So what we did with our engineers, kind of go through the systems. Now, there isn't recognition of some systems being large and some systems being small, but our engineer helped us develop risk scores for our systems. And you can see that after 2018, when we had those sewage overflows, you know, we had a significant bar in the F grade region. And then you can see that after the 2021 upgrades, which focus specifically on those failed systems, we had a couple more grade A things and a few less grade F things. The challenge is that even with the nugget of money, the $30 million that we asked for, we tried to be very careful when we were talking about that the ratepayers and everybody knew that this was just the beginning. We always knew that there was more to do, and that last graph, which shows that there will be still significant numbers of systems in the C, D, and F grade, is sort of the reason why we need to keep going on this work. There's a couple of reasons for that. A, $30 million is not enough money to fix 3 plants which are more than 20 years old, but also anything that we're not able to fix continues to age, and then it continues to get poorer and poorer grade as it goes out towards failure. Next slide. So we're just starting this conversation with you all about what I'm sort of calling our 2030 resiliency vision of what a world it would be to have a system where everything was in these A, B, and C sort of acceptable grades. With our consulting engineer, we have been crunching the numbers of what this would cost, and the numbers are large. For just the wastewater treatment plants alone, so not collection system infrastructure, not stormwater outfalls, not dealing with combined sewer overflows, we are looking at something in the realm of $150 million. That's not the number that we think we'll be going for in November for a lot of reasons. We're doing some analysis right now to figure out what that magnitude does need to be. We recognize that on one hand, it's a really challenging time in the city to be even contemplating this sort of borrowing. But on the flip side, we are hopeful that the additional federal funding, or rather federal loan money that's coming, is going to make it the best time that one could be trying to borrow money, mostly because the hope, or what's being broadcast right now, is that there will be additional loans, loan money pools, and then there is likely to be loan forgiveness. And so we're hopeful that we may be able to stretch these ratepayer funds. Another thing we're looking at is maybe considering longer term bonds. We've often gone out for 20-year bonds. Some of the infrastructure that we're going to be looking at building should be longer term, potentially in the 35 to 50-year range, particularly if we end up consolidating East Plant with Main Plant, which is a alternative that is starting to rise to the top that we'll be talking with you more about, hopefully in the future. But nonetheless, this 150 million is just for the wastewater treatment plants, and we do know we want to make sure we broadcast that there's a lot of other infrastructure needs that we need to be tackling, including drinking water and including the things that Jenna is going to be talking to you about just now. I think next slide, and I think it's, yep, handing it over to Jenna. Are you there, Jenna?
I need to unmute myself. So this is a quote from the Lake Champlain Basin Program's 2021 State of the Lake Report. Cyanobacteria conditions vary significantly among lake segments, and warm weather blooms continue to present a challenge to recreation and public health. It's important to understand why cyanobacteria blooms happen. Cyanobacteria feed on nutrients, more specifically phosphorus. We have a really wet spring, a lot of nutrients are washed into the lake, and then those nutrients stick to the sediment that ends up accumulating in shallow bays. And on a really warm, really calm day with no wind, the cyanobacteria start feeding on those nutrients and begin to reproduce really quickly, which leads to a bloom. So for the remainder of the presentation, you're going to hear me using the word load a lot. And I think you may have heard Megan say it a couple of times. And I just want to take a quick minute to explain what we mean when we're talking about loading. So before, when I was saying nutrients enter the lake, that is summed up as the nutrient load. The load comes from the flow of treated wastewater or stormwater runoff entering the lake, multiplied by how much P, or phosphorus, is actually in that water. Now, this is a graphic many of us are probably familiar with. When we're talking about phosphorus contributions to Lake Champlain, it's really important to understand that there are 3 distinct watersheds that contribute. We have New York, Quebec, and of course, Vermont. Vermont makes up the lion's share of phosphorus contribution at approximately 69% of the total load. And it's also hard to ignore the really big piece of this pie that's credited to agriculture, but I'm going to ask that you do just that for now. While we fully recognize and understand that everyone has to do their part in order to really move forward on this, Burlington is focused on the pieces that we contribute to, and that's the urban runoff and wastewater treatment facility sectors. So when you put Burlington in context with the other parts of the state that contribute to our lake segments, we account for approximately 3.8% of the total phosphorus load that's going there. What that comes out to for us is that we have about 1,102 pounds to reduce overall, 990 pounds in the wastewater treatment facility sector, 204 pounds in the developed land sector. Now, the way those numbers stack up against the rest of the state may seem like a drop in the bucket, but the important context here is how directly Burlington's economic livelihood is tied to lake health. According to a 2021 report from the Gund Institute, studies estimate approximately $2.2 billion in economic losses each year due to the effects of nutrient pollution in lakes and ponds. Now, here in Vermont, Lake Champlain alone generates close to $300 million in tourism revenues every year. So here in Burlington, the relationship between our economic health and the health of the lake really can't be overstated. And as if tackling excess nutrient loading wasn't enough, we also have other water quality challenges. CSOs are primarily stormwater with a smaller fraction of sewage, but still present a significant water quality issue by causing acute periods of elevated bacteria for short periods of time, versus the chronic concern posed by nutrient loading. We've done a huge amount of work since the 1990s to address our CSOs, down to only 5 outfalls from 12 originally. Now, of those remaining 5, Pine Street does still see multiple activations a year and discharges to the barge canal and ultimately the lake. In-stream erosion also continues to be an ongoing challenge for our urban streams. Bank erosion can destroy sensitive habitat for aquatic organisms who live in the stream bed, and it also releases nutrients from the eroded material, which further exacerbates phosphorus issues in downstream lakes and ponds. So now that we've sort of set the stage on the swath of challenges and investments facing our city, let's talk about integrated planning and why, what it is and why we're doing it. The EPA came up with the idea of integrated planning in recognition of the constantly increasing regulatory requirements that face municipalities across the country. Now, each permit that EPA or the state administers may be perfectly manageable on its own. And these regulatory requirements add up, it can create a pretty burdensome financial situation for cities and towns. Further, simply complying with each permit independently doesn't give us any opportunity to consider how different alternatives could better support other community objectives like equity, environmental justice, climate resilience, things like that. And it's also worth noting that even though Burlington was one of the first communities to consider integrated planning, there are several other communities throughout the Northeast and across the country who are actively implementing the framework today. Now, the good news here is that we aren't starting from ground zero. The Lake Champlain TMDL was based on modeling conducted over a 10-year period between the year 2000 and 2010. Now, one major component of developing this plan has been accounting for work the city's done since 2010, as well as considering the basic performance and optimization work that's been done at our 3 wastewater treatment plants. So when you look at our baseline goal of 10,684 pounds per year, then you look at our performance to date, you see 9,582 pounds per year that we've already achieved. Now, what that accounts for comes up with, it's really 4 primary things. First and foremost is that this is a 2-part. Our wastewater plants weren't discharging permitted flows to begin with. And then our wastewater plants also have been and continue to perform better than their permit limits, specifically main plant. Chemical optimization at all 3 plants has also occurred over the last several years. And while it's been most successful at main plant, it has achieved reductions at all 3 facilities. And then finally, of course, the stormwater retrofits that we've constructed throughout the city have also contributed to this figure. So while this accounting is certainly favorable to Burlington, those last 1,102 pounds that Megan sort of started talking about earlier, those pounds are going to be the trickiest. So let's get into how we're going to bring this thing home. Megan, do you want to touch on annual average?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a nuance, but when you start listening to what our phosphorus reduction strategies are, it's important that you do understand that the 1,102 pounds is an annual average that was based on the study period from 2017 to 2019 at our plants. And the challenge is that, as you can see from this graph, the phosphorus load at our largest wastewater treatment plant, main plant, can be greatly influenced by the amount of rainfall and also the intensity of storms. And so this is important to keep in mind when we look at our strategies, that it's not really landing a mark on a given year. It's making sure that every year, no matter what Mother Nature throws at us, that our strategy is going to keep us within permit limits and make sure that we're fully tackling the phosphorus that's coming our way. I'm going to hand it back over to Jenna so she can go through what those strategies are.
So as I was touching upon earlier, the work our consultant team has been doing for the last 5 years has required a significant amount of engineering and technical analysis, looking at different strategies that we could pursue to meet our regulatory goals. This work included assessing different project combinations and then assembling those into different combinations that we could implement. So the candidate portfolios is what we're calling them, were evaluated on a variety of criteria related to their different benefits and impacts. The process finally included a financial capability assessment to consider the monetary impacts that something like this would have to the city. And so the consulting team ultimately presented us with 3 main portfolio options with a series of enhancements that we could pursue based on community feedback and priorities, as well as available funding. We ended up breaking these portfolio options up a bit to include some of these additional enhancements, which are the 1B and the 2B that you see. The most significant difference between the options in Portfolio 1 and Portfolio 2 is the wastewater treatment upgrades that were considered. We are not going to delve into much detail on those tonight, but would be happy to answer any questions either offline or sometime later this week. In terms of cost estimates, it's also important to note that the estimates presented here do not currently account for inflation, nor do they consider ongoing challenges related to the pandemic and ancillary supply chain issues. And ultimately, this is the portfolio that came out on top. Now, our selected path consists of 5 primary project focus areas. 1 is implementation of the projects that were included with our original flow restoration plans for Anglesby, Potash, and Centennial Brooks. 2 is implementation of a series of green stormwater infrastructure systems, specifically in combined sewer areas. 3 is repair of separate stormwater outfalls throughout the city's MS4 area. 4 is upgrades at the main wastewater plant to implement enhanced filtration, also known as tertiary treatment. And 5, installation of a 300,000 gallon underground CSO storage tank at Callahan Park to manage flows to the Pine Street CSO. Now, a preferred portfolio also includes enhancements to stormwater maintenance programs like street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, things like that, as well as some programming for residential retrofit incentives. And while these items don't explicitly count towards our regulatory objectives, they do recognize the host of other pollutants contained in stormwater. So where does this leave us in terms of regulatory compliance? Well, when you break down each project category by how much phosphorus removal it can achieve, this is what the visual looks like. What you see is that even though the stormwater projects we're proposing to implement are substantial, they still wouldn't get us our basic phosphorus goal without the support of that substantial investment at the main wastewater treatment facility. And this is where I really want to reiterate a critical benefit to using integrated planning, which is the use of an integrated phosphorus target. Now, strictly speaking, the TMDL would have us meet the reduction goals for wastewater and developed lands independently of each other. This approach allows us the flexibility to meet an integrated waste load allocation using a variety of strategies, with consideration of what's most cost effective and what's most beneficial for our community. Further, beyond that, integrated planning also allows us to implement these solutions over a slightly longer timeline. Going through this process has allowed us to schedule projects in a way that front loads our implementation period with the projects that will achieve the greatest water quality benefits earlier on. Now, our preferred portfolio does still include a significant number of CSO mitigation efforts, including, again, the Pine Street CSO storage tank, things that are happening right now with additional flow metering to refine our hydraulic and hydrologic model in areas with capacity concerns, and also implementing basement surcharge programs. And it also, again, includes urban stream flow restoration projects where we, are prioritizing FRP projects that have the highest phosphorus removal, also prioritizing projects with the highest cost benefit, and projects where grant support is available. So what's next? As some of you are already aware, we went to Board of Finance and City Council on February 22nd to advance the preliminary phase for the Pine Street CSO tank, the pilot study for tertiary treatment at main plant, as well as the enhanced H&H model for our collection system. That project in particular is going to provide really critical data to support both the first 2 projects I mentioned and a significant number of other projects included in this plan. And we're also working to finalize the integrated plan report and incorporate feedback that DEC provided at the end of 2021. And once that's complete, DEC will begin developing an integrated permit, which will go through a public notice process similar to other permits that the state issues. And if all goes well, we'll be starting construction on some of these components, hopefully over the next couple of years. Megan, back to you.
Yep, just a quick closing slide. When we start to add the infrastructure ask, plus what we're going to need to do over the next couple of years or 10 to 20 years with integrated planning, we are looking at a very large number. It's why ratepayer affordability is key. We are not alone. Communities across the country, this graph shows that pretty steadily, all US cities are experiencing increases in utility bills, and it is because people are having to tackle infrastructure as well as these new regulatory challenges. So I think with that, I think that's the end of our presentation. We'd love to answer any questions or take any feedback that you may have.
We also have a copy of the current report up on our website. So burlingtonbt.gov/water/integrated plan. Or you can also reach out to Megan or I directly at any time. Yeah.
Great, thank you all for the presentation. And I know that these slides have been posted, this draft version of them has been posted on the supporting material for this commission meeting as well. So thank you for getting that out there. Yeah, I'll open up to fellow commissioners for discussion at this time. Check in with Commissioner Kennedy. Anything on your mind here?
Thank you so much for your presentation. As a recent UVM grad, I studied environmental studies and talked so much about stormwater infrastructure, and it's super interesting to see it like actually be getting done while I'm like living here still. And yeah, I don't have a ton of questions, honestly. I guess one thing that came to mind was in regards to like rain gardens and like that type of stormwater infrastructure. How is that being, like, how is the location of that being determined? What sort of model is being used for that?
Well, we cite those with in a number of ways. So the series of gardens that we implemented last summer, that we installed last summer in the South End, were cited in those areas because they are within an area of the collection system that contributes to Pine Street CSO, and they have appropriate soil conditions to promote infiltration. So that's probably the primary driver, is that A, they're in an area that we actually need to achieve stormwater reductions in, and B, is that the soil conditions are favorable. So we're looking for sandy soils to a decent depth. If we're doing subsurface infiltration, we have to get a full 8 feet, which really isn't possible anywhere in the city other than the Old North End. And then, you know, we're also looking for a good separation to groundwater and things like that. So
the other driver would be other projects that the city is doing, such as like the St. Paul project or the Main Street Great Streets, right? We take any sort of large scale road reconstruction as an opportunity for our staff to look and see what are the opportunities. And sometimes we pass them up because the soils aren't great and it's just not going to be a good bang for the buck. But for others, it has paid dividends.
Yeah. I guess that's all I have for questions. I hope that we can continue to improve our infrastructure here. I know it's such a pain to have to pay so much money for something that's absolutely critical, but I'm excited that everyone is so enthusiastic about it.
we have lots of enthusiasm here. And
right. If we could get paid for our enthusiasm, we wouldn't be asking the ratepayers for money.
And if it's yes, thank you. Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Megan. You know I love listening to you and your team talk about water infrastructure. So just a couple clarifiers, really. Martin, you had mentioned 7,600 feet of water pipe rehab and 4,800 feet of collection pipe rehab. What percentage?
48,000.
48,000. Oh, yes, you're right. Sorry. 48,000. What percentage of the total is that? I mean, is that, because it seems like, you know, especially the 48,000 out the 4,800 seems like a lot, but what percentage of the total is that? How much more do we need to do?
Sure. For the water, I'm a little bit more off the top of my head. We have roughly 110 miles of water. So something of that magnitude is about 1%. And keeping at that rate, you know, that's a good goal to at least be achieving 1% every year, and kind of keeping up with that. We've done more in the last few years as well. The sewer and stormwater, since we haven't done as much, Megan may have the percent, but
I think if I'm recalling, we roughly, it's like 57 miles of sewer, I think, and maybe 56 of, it's roughly the same because it's largely based on the streets. So even if you just assume 110, the 48,000 is like 9 miles. So it's a chunk. It's the worst chunk. We went through a whole process to look at the 20, we filmed 20% of our system based on sort of risk or consequence of failure. And then of that chunk that we filmed, we're tackling those pipes, but it's we got to keep going type effort so that we don't let those grades continue to slip.
No, that's great. I just wanted to get a sense of
We'll get you the exact number because it's a good metric for us to have anyway.
Okay, that's fine. I wasn't, not to keep you to anything, but this sense of this is where we are, this is the progress that we expect to make. And kind of we're plugging along, and I like what you said, that we're kind of dealing with the kind of most risky, challenging ones first. So no, thank you. You also talked about the stormwater outfall improvements, which is a term I wasn't familiar with until this evening. But I understood your slides. And so dealing with having that help the slope stabilization, especially along Manhattan Drive, is fantastic, right? Because that bang for the buck impacts a lot of other infrastructure that Public Works oversees. You also mentioned 6 other high-risk areas. Is there then a priority list of how to tackle those? And is it based on kind of funding, risk, et cetera?
Yeah, we have a scoring framework that's been developed over the last several years and has recently been updated by our new asset manager, Rocky Vogler. So yeah, the next round of outfalls is based on a number of criteria specifically surrounding risk. So risk of failure and consequence of failure.
Okay, great. That's all I have. Great work, folks. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Overby.
I also love hearing all this details about the water and the wastewater and the stormwater stuff, but I have a couple quick questions. One is sort of detail. What is the CSO GSI Old North End item that was on one of your slides? It's sort of near to the one about the Manhattan Drive outfall. I'm just wondering, is that one of the outfall areas along Manhattan Drive?
No, that's actually the next phase of the projects that we came to you guys about last spring, I believe. Remember when I think we came last spring to have parking adjustments done in the south end for a series of rain garden projects? This is the next phase of that. So that was a $1 million grant that we got at the end of 2018. That it was a significant grant award that kind of flew under the radar, but we constructed the series of gardens in the south end last year. And then the next phase is going to be 2 subsurface systems on Rose and School Street in the Old North End. We have completed designs for several others, but we don't have enough grant funding to do all of them. So we'll be.
And that answers the question, though, that they're on Rose and School Street and there's some subsurface kind of treatment. Okay.
There's subsurface in there. They would be helping to continue to reduce the somewhat infrequent, but they are still occurring discharges to North Champlain and Park Street. There's CSOs there on either side of the Beltway, and those occasionally go off. And so we're just chipping away every year, trying to reduce the number of times that those go off.
Yes, I'm familiar with the one on the east side of the Beltway. I didn't know there was one on the other side. So yeah, that answers that. And one question: when these rain gardens get put in, what is the protocol for keeping them cleaned out? Is that a partnership with the Parks Department, or is that a DPW thing? Because I know I've had a comment from somebody who lives on Grant Street about how the one that's there is not well maintained. And so I think they're great. I'm just asking what the procedure is and the protocol for keeping them maintained.
We have a contractor actually that takes care of those gardens. If there's an issue with the one on Grant Street, they should contact us and let us know, because we do have a contractor that's been taking care of them. And James Sherrard, our stormwater coordinator, does oversee that.
Or see Click Fix if that's easier for people. Yep.
So there is a contract. So that should be, they should call Water Resource. Who should they call?
They can submit it through See Click Fix.
Okay, so see Click Fix, because it definitely is not being maintained. And I walk by there quite a bit, so I will relay that information.
I think it's a work in progress as we develop those contracts too. We're trying to figure out the right amount of frequency, and probably certain gardens need more love and attention than others, just based on, you know, traffic that goes by and trash that accumulates. So it's good feedback for us to hear, because you guys are our eyes and ears out in the community.
Yeah, and I just didn't know. I mean, it would really be helpful if people did know, because all I hear is complaints. Why aren't you doing something about it? And I'm like, well, you know, I didn't know the procedure. And since we're going to be putting in a lot more, it would be great if we've had a way to publicize what people should do. Because I know somebody who's on that street who feels like she has to keep cleaning it up and readjusting the plants. And anyway, one of your slides talks about the systems, the thing about the risk systems. What's the definition of a system that you're using? I know you said small ones, big ones, but
yeah,
what do you mean?
I mean, it was just more sort of a self-contained unit, like a clarifier or a the belt filter press. It's a cursory, quick way to kind of try to quantify it. I wanted to make sure that folks knew that not all systems would cost the same amount. Like, you might have one system that costs $5 million to replace, and another one that's, you know, $500,000. So I've been thinking about that graph, and maybe there's a way of doing it based on money, you know, dollars needed in each grade or something. But happy to get any feedback on how we could better use that sort of
I just had a
concept
question
of
about what
reported.
systems meant. So it made it hard for me to get an understanding of that chart. I know, I can imagine it's hard to figure out how to present it. Two last questions. You mentioned that there's a basement surcharge prevention program. What was that?
That's actually, yeah, we need to probably change the wording on that. That's when people who have subsurface, or basement, like showers, sinks, washer dryer connections or washer connections, any plumbing fixture that's in the basement, and people, when there's large rain events, water, sewage comes into their basement. Per code, they're technically supposed to have a device that prevents that from happening. We recognize that a lot of people have inherited houses where that's not the case. And we'd like to try to figure out how to help bring those systems up to code, because of all of the combined sewer overflows that happen, having one happen in your basement is probably the most public health, you know, challenge.
So that's not making a surcharge payment, you know,
No,
to a homeowner who has that problem, but it's a basement, it's the stop, it's the
stop
backwash.
sewage backups into basement that are
Right.
related to storm events.
Okay,
Sewage
got it.
backups can happen for other reasons, but
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think that was discussed a lot on Cliff Street when that whole sidewalk was getting put in. And then one last thing, I know I've heard this about the rebate to help people scope their sewer connection. Can you just sort of help people know what that is? Because I discussed it with somebody on my street, but you're talking about when people actually get the company to put a camera through their sewer to see if there's a problem. You have a program maybe that people can get a rebate for the cost of that?
Yeah, folks can get up to $250 for their sewer inspection back. So most outfits charge right around $250. But if they schedule that inspection and have that work done, they pay the contractor and then they can submit that back to us. We have an online form. They can also call customer care to ask any questions. But yeah, folks can get up to $250 back for those inspections. In addition to that, they can also get up to $75 back for purchasing WaterSense certified fixtures. So toilets, sinks, things like that save water. They can get rebates for those as well. And it's not one or the other. They could get both. So.
Great. Well, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Barr.
Hi, thanks. I reviewed the slides and I really appreciate the presentation because it really fleshed it out for me, and I actually have no questions. Such a great job. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner
you.
Bose.
Yeah, I also don't have any questions, but as I am often really kind of taken by how you present, not just in in one of our meetings, but just kind of how you frame this particular issue. It's obviously really sobering, thinking about the challenges, not just economic, but the bigger challenges. And I just wanted to give a couple of pieces of feedback. I really appreciate the fact that you lay out not only the short and medium term cost of doing this work, but also the cost of not doing this work. And so I think that laying out what disinvestment historically has meant, what deferring these kinds of costs means in the longer term, I think is really important. I'm actually, I mentioned to my fellow commissioners, I'm out here on the West Coast in the city of Vancouver, British Columbia. And ironically, I just had a meeting with a number of city planners, and they were talking about, they're obviously a city on a much larger scale, but they're talking about a $6 billion investment in sewage and wastewater infrastructure over the next 4 years, including a 65% rate increase for residents here. And so, in your slides there where you lay out that this, you kind of talk about it briefly, that this is something that we are not dealing with individually, but this is something that's to bring up that question of systems again, is like, we're paying for a lot of decades of underinvestment. And so I think it's really good that you continue to emphasize that. I also liked that in your report here that you're laying out, it may be that there are other points where we're seeing more of the problem being produced in terms of lake health. But I like the fact that you zeroed out kind of, okay, this is what we as a city need to focus on. So I just thought that was really effective. I completely agree with you. Of course, this is a very difficult time to bring forward to residents. Here's another cost we need to think about, but this is a cost we need to think about to echo Commissioner Kennedy's kind of points, like, you need to deal with this. So just again, real props for the way in which you presented this. There's no easy way to present some of this, but I think, yeah, just I really appreciate the clarity that was in this framework. So thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, Maya, again, I also sort of echo some sentiment here. Really appreciate the presentation. Just one question on the risk scores. You noted there were some in looking out for what we've done in the past couple of years and looking ahead to the next couple of years, where the counts in the DNF category are actually increasing. Could you elaborate on that? I think I caught that those are things that weren't at the top of the list for fixing, but have since continued to age and are
Yeah, so for
contribute
instance,
risk.
the things that are slipping, or those bars are getting bigger because something that was in the C category right now that we don't have enough money to tackle, keeps cascading down. It gets older, and therefore, being old is one of our measures of failure risk. There's obviously other things like, has it actually broken? Are vibrations starting to appear? There are more robust ways of zeroing in true failure. A lot of our systems are so dang old that even being considered in the C category, I'm like, whew. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. I can share sort of the tables that were used, and you can actually see that something in this year, is a C, and then it moves to the D category because we weren't able to get it back in the A category.
Yeah, that's thank you for that. I'm just sort of pondering. I don't have anything witty to say about how to present it, but there is that story of if we didn't make the investments that we did, the expected slippage would be, all the Bs are in D now, the Cs are in F, et cetera. And some of those we've sort of course corrected and shifted to the good side, and some we haven't as much. So I don't know, I'd like to stare at that a little bit more offline. And
It's a lot of what goes into how much hand-wringing we're going to do over what we asked for in November, right? Because we could ask for a smaller number, but then we're just still like the hole is continuing to be dug. Do you go for a bigger number with the hopes that federal funding is going to come through? There's a lot of different calculus that goes into that, but every time we get or end up asking for something that is less than our true number, we are running that risk of those things continuing to slide, and we're just going to have to deal with it later. And we might have emergency costs, and with cost of inflation, we have to put that into effect, like pushing something out 5 years. It could be twice as expensive then as it is now. So it's going to be a fun little financial exercise.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing onto that, is that the infrastructure at the wastewater plants, it's a lot more mechanical, versus pipes and infrastructure in the right of way, which has more of a 50 to 100-year lifespan. Infrastructure at the wastewater plants, a lot of the systems are aged more for like 20 or 30 years. So that slippage will happen quicker.
I kind of glossed over it. One of the things we're excited about from an innovation standpoint was that consolidation of East Plant with Main Plant, which would turn a lot of the assets at East Plant into potentially longer life assets and convert some of its value into an actual force main, like a collection system asset that gets it over to Main Plant. And that's where I was talking about looking at the numbers and making the case, one, if we do that, some of that stuff could be paid for over a longer time period. And two, what we do now could save the ratepayers 20 years from now and 50 years from now, because they don't then have to upgrade 3 plants. They'd only have to upgrade 2 plants. And then they might have to make modest investments at the new pump station that would replace East Plant. So just to try to share, we're trying to really figure out how to slice the cake in a way that, maybe even if it does cost a little bit more now, if it's going to save our Burlington generations a lot of money over the long term, we have to look at that, right? We got to make smarter decisions than we did in the past.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Then another one that didn't, I missed the story or the connection a bit, was on the proposed phosphorus performance chart. And you don't need to do anything with it now, but maybe in the, as you sort of work the roadshow moving forward there, I gather that there was a gap in the phosphorus reduction load goal that's remaining on the order of about 1,000-ish. And the colored bars at the bottom added up to like 2,500-ish. You can maybe, when you're telling it, sort of connect that a little bit more and show where the 2,500 came from. Anyway,
are you talking about the why, if our goal was 1,100, that we are actually going to be reducing like 2,600?
I'm talking about the, I don't know, it was slide 33. There's like a 238% of Burlington average annual target.
Yep. So that was, and maybe we can do a better job of linking it. When I went into my spiel about why 1,100 pounds wasn't necessarily 1,100 pounds every single year, what I was trying to say is the 238 exceeding it and meeting 238% of our goal is what will hopefully give us the buffer that in those extremely wet years, when our phosphorus load is actually more than annual average, our technology will still be able to meet permit. Right. So we need 1,100 plus this buffer to deal with that wet weather variability. When we do our pilot study, because this is one of my areas of risk or concern, when we do our pilot study, we may be looking at what the cost would be and the feasibility of doing partial, what we call dual use treatment. Dual use treatment would be filtering both the normal wastewater flow that goes through as well as the flow that goes through our wet weather treatment system. We don't think we need it. We need to treat all of our wet weather treatment system, but we wonder if we may have to treat a little bit of it just to give us that added climate resiliency. I don't know if I'm answering your
Gotcha.
question or not.
No, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that does answer my question.
'Cause otherwise, it's like, why are we spending so much money if 100% is good? You know, you can take that to the bank. And the thing is, we can't because of the variability.
And oh, by the way, the extreme storm events have been sort of unfortunately more common in recent years than in back a decade or two. I like it. Yeah, no, thank you for that review. All right, nothing further on my end. So I'll open it up to public comment at this time.
Are we gonna talk about the pod situation? And
Not on this item. It's more so more specifically, if there's any public comments regarding the Clean Water Resiliency Plan, welcome those at this. All right.
Karen Busher's not there still? Come on.
we
Sharon.
asked a bunch of questions. And
The presentation for the pods comes up right after this segment.
All right. Seeing none, I will close out public comment on this item, and there is no action requested on this item as well. So, thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, this is good stuff. I appreciate the updates.
We're going to be restarting wastewater plant tours. We think it's
Yes.
important that the community get into the plant and actually see the stuff that we're going to be asking for money to fix. So stay tuned on that. I'm sure Director Spencer will loop you guys in once we pick our official day.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Okay.
Coming to a plant near you.
Well, zoom
Excellent.
in.
All right,
Thank-
moving forward.
Thank
to-
you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Moving forward to item 6 on the agenda, shelter pod proposal and Elmwood Avenue surface lot. Welcome a presentation from Public Works staff or CEDO staff here.
Yes, I believe it's CEDO staff here will kick this agenda item off.
Thank you. Brian Pine, I'm the Director of the Community and Economic Development Office. And with me tonight is Samantha Dunn, the Assistant Director for Community Works, and Marcella Gange, who is our Community Development Manager. I will try to provide a higher level overview of the process to date and what engagement is coming in the coming days and weeks. The process for selecting this site, and we will provide the list of the other sites that were considered, was to develop a matrix that was shared with staff from Department of Public Works, Department of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront, and several other departments to get feedback on what are the factors that will ensure hopefully the best outcomes for both the people who will be residing in the shelters, pods, as well as for the overall community. And we will provide that list of all the sites. So that question was asked previously, was what other locations were considered. The issues that were raised around sort of management and staffing and supervision, all those issues we will be addressing at another point. We're not prepared to go into great detail because given that the commission is primarily focused on the question of decommissioning the parking lot as your decision point, we want to stay focused sort of on those issues. But with regards to public process, the process to date has been a meeting with downtown business owners and managers and property owners that occurred yesterday. Of course, the Public Works Commission meeting tonight. Depending on the results of this meeting, we're going to the City Council this coming Monday, to be followed by a presentation that is going to be made before the Wards 2 and 3 Neighborhood Planning Assembly on April 14th. As well, we are planning several neighborhood meetings at the neighborhood level, and spoke just yesterday with the property owners and managers of the most adjacent property to the south of the parking lot, the O'Brien properties, to talk about holding a meeting in their building with residents, and the additional meeting. In addition to that, we would like to propose holding, if we can, in the community room meeting space at the nearby Unitarian Church as a good location to convene neighbors to answer questions, to hear concerns, to hopefully ensure that this is a location that is both welcoming, but also is that we minimize disruption and impact on nearby properties. So I wanted to give that overview on the process that we've engaged in to date. Samantha is going to work with Jeff Padgett to talk through the content of the memo and the plan for relocation parking. And Marcella right now is going to explain some of the other public engagement and outreach that has taken place to date. So I just want to pass the microphone to Marcella. And I think in this case, how is the volume? Can you hear us okay?
It's kind of echoey.
She has a hearing issue, so that's why we moved, yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We'll try and keep the volume up, though. It seems like the volume may work if we use what I like to call in our house the outside voice. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, hello everyone. Can you demonstrate that you can hear me, because I'm quite softly spoken, so I know that sometimes folks have a problem understanding me. I'm sure that's the only reason. It's nothing to do with my accent. I've been working with CEDO for about 6 years on a number of different kinds of grants, mostly equity-based projects, and for the last couple of years I've been working with CEDO on our continuum of care grants and working with the continuum of care and working on a lot of the projects through the pandemic that are related to supporting folks who are experiencing homelessness and with the objective of ending homelessness. I worked with Paul Dragon, who we'll be hearing from shortly from CPOEO, who's partnered with us as the operating partner for the Community Resource Centre. We established that during the pandemic as a daytime warming centre. It's become much more than that, which is why we renamed it as the Community Resource Centre. It's a low barrier space that folks are able to go to access much more than just food and drink, but access resources, housing, advice, and other kind of essential goods. We have, through that relationship, we're getting a lot of information that's feeding in and informing the development of this project. And we are also working with the various outreach teams that are working around the city that are doing either work with folks who are unsheltered or folks who are in hotels that are part of the General Assistance Emergency Shelter Program, and gathering information from them. This afternoon we had a really good discussion with the group of outreach workers about to kind of get their views on this project and to develop input and further input on that. And we've also additionally spoken to folks with lived experience as well to inform the direction of this project. But the initial development of the ideas really came from the requests that we were hearing from the community of folks who are experiencing homelessness. We heard very clearly that people needed alternative types of shelter, access to alternative types of shelter. There were folks who weren't able to succeed in the hotels. They were looking for different types of shelter. There are different reasons for that. You know, maybe couples want access to spaces, and we'll be able to do that within this project. Folks with pets, there are lots of different reasons why people might be wanting to come to this place. So we're really trying to fulfill a need that's between the hotels, between the traditional shelter buildings, but of course the long-term view is working with people to get them into coordinated entry, if that's what they desire, and into permanent housing. And we'll be continuing that kind of outreach and those conversations. And I think it'd be good to talk as well about, like, I know we're not talking about the operations of the shelter, but what we'll be looking for is having a community meeting group that's around the shelter of the Community Resource Centre. This is a model that's been used around these pilot villages around the country, where you bring in different stakeholders, so businesses, local faith groups. So the UU Church would be a good example of that. Community members and neighbours, staff, volunteers, and the folks that are living at the site as well. To have a space where people are able to talk with each other, to solve any initial problems that are coming, but on my side, more importantly, that they're able to access opportunities and bring ideas in, and it's a way that people can contribute to really embracing and supporting this community. So we want people to know that from the outset, this is the kind of approach that we're really wanting to take as these projects are established at the site.
Great.
Samantha.
Yeah, thanks Priscilla. That was a good overview. I'm going to try and refocus us back on sort of the business at hand tonight. The reason that we're talking at all to this commission about this project is because the site that was selected as the top priority site, of course, was the Elmwood Ave parking lot. This commission has jurisdiction over the use of that parking lot, and we're really here to make a request of this commission to temporarily decommission this parking lot for parking for up to a period of up to 36 months, no longer, to support this project. And I've been working close with Jeff on making sure that the city has the ability to accommodate the people who are currently using the parking lot and other facilities. We know that is the case. There is the ability to accommodate them, and there's an additional request to this commission to be able to accommodate them in the garage at the existing rate that they're paying for their permits. What do we ask them to make that move? And happy to answer any questions with Jeff about sort of those two motions.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that overview. Jeff, is there anything on your end you wanted to add at this point?
No, I think Samantha summed it up nicely.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just here to answer questions that you might have. Support the project if I can.
Great, thank you. So yeah, as I stated earlier, our this commission's role here is to the parking, and there's an ask here to adjust how that parking is done. Other aspects of this project, or time for another meeting on another evening. So I'll say that by way of introduction here, and open up to my fellow commissioners for discussion at this point. I'll start with the Vice Chair O'Neill Wavaco.
Thank you. So on the one hand, this seemed like, okay, this could be straightforward, our role in the commission, looking at this sort of transaction of infrastructure, temporarily decommissioning the Elmwood car park for these pods. So on the surface, that seems just yes or no, right? But because it's trying to address a city problem of homelessness and a low barrier community, I think it's incumbent upon us to ask all the kind of residual questions, certainly as some of the public have brought up at the start of this, and we have gotten some emails. I think one concern, and I'm keenly aware that it's hard to do outreach until you get permission, because you had to come to us, to come to the commission to ask permission for this change of use so that you could actually then move forward on the pod community. So how do you start outreach without a done deal? So I recognize the challenges that CETO is facing right now, and also recognize the concerns of the community members who live around there. And just to kind of reiterate some of the comments that were made, there are problems with homelessness and mental health issues. Many of us see these on a daily basis. And I think wondering and asking, at what point will the community have a better sense of what the oversight is going to look like for this community, recognizing that the folks who are going to be residing in whatever pod community, wherever it's located, are in essence our neighbors, right? And how then can this system help them be good neighbors? So that communication between the residents of the pod and the residents who live there and the landlords needs to be really needs to be key. The pod community, I hope, is held to the same standards, that I am. I'm not allowed to have a fire in my backyard unless it's in my barbecue. Noise ordinance, I should know this. Is it like 10 o'clock? 7 to 10. Those sort of neighborly, respectful policies that we have as a city that we all comply with, that those standards are also held for the neighbors in the pod. So I don't know if you can answer some of that. Again, I know it's hard to answer because you don't have the definite yes, but I think to address some of the concerns that the public has brought up, and certainly that we're hearing, safety as well. I mean, I walked by that car park twice, looking at some of the apartments nearby, and again, just like kind of eyeballing it as a mom, thinking like, where there were signs of kids, my kids who are in the Burlington School District, either going to BCL at the Old North End Center by St. Joe's or downtown BHS, recognizing that we have young people as well and wanting to be safe. So how can CETO help address some of these concerns for our neighbors?
I'm going to touch to the first one, and then Marcel is going to join me here and provide some response to your questions. The oversight plan is something that we are in the process of really developing. It is developing and evolving. The goal here is that the facility would be operational on July 1st, and so we're trying to ensure that we are really deliberate and thoughtful about both oversight and supervision. And so we are engaging in discussions with potential organizations that would manage this facility. And when we talk about oversight, I think that's what we're mostly talking about is, how is behavior going to be monitored and ensured that people abide by a certain set of standards, a code of conduct, if you will. All of that is very much part of the work we're doing, but we're doing it simultaneously with the other efforts. So we don't have great detail or granularity on that. We just have a commitment to, to really be focused on developing a management plan and an operational plan that, again, ensures that this facility is, minimizes the impact as to the greatest extent possible. And I think Marcella can talk a little bit about how to ensure that residents are good neighbors.
Yeah, well, more than that, I just wanted to reinforce that the state has, there are statewide emergency shelter standards. So this isn't, we establish something and then we think about what the operational plan will be. As much as there are standards for this, we're going to be seeking funding from OEO for the Office of Economic Opportunity at state level for some of the staffing costs of the site, and within that we'll be required to operate within those emergency shelter standards, and those standards are around kind of how what the prioritizations are for folks coming into the shelter, how people, the record keeping requirements, how people are signed in, how the shelter is operated, and also discharge. There are very strict requirements around discharge and having kind of fair procedures that may be associated with voluntary or involuntary discharge from a site. So, as I said, we're not making up the rules as we go along. There is a framework and a set of standards that we'll be working with them.
And I would just add, I just wanted to one thing you touched on was following the same like rules and regulations that all of the other neighbors in the neighborhood have to follow. And that's absolutely the intent of this project. If there's no fires allowed, there will be no fire, you know, like all of those things. Again, the site will be staffed 24 hours a day. And there'll be ongoing, I think Brian has laid out a series of process for community meetings before this project opens for operations. And Marcella was talking about a process of engaging with neighbors and others in the community throughout the operation of this temporary facility, so that both all of the neighbors in the neighborhood can help this community be good neighbors and vice versa. Because I think, you know, we can all learn from each other when we take the time to engage with one another, and that's the intent of how this facility would be operated. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, just a couple more things real quick. I think to echo, maybe Sharon Bushra mentioned this earlier, the need for responsiveness, so that this isn't someone's, you know, woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning because of this noise and there's no response. And I know we're dealing with police staffing issues and so forth, but when you're woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to have to go down and figure out what that is, if it's coming from that community or any neighbor. So recognizing that responsiveness and really underscoring the safety of the residents. I can appreciate their level of concern. This is, I think, a really exciting and innovative way to begin to deal with our housing issues and homelessness. But it's unknown for these neighbors. And so I think recognizing that, acknowledging it, and then addressing those concerns and having that feedback, I think would be important. And I think, you know, I wonder for the commission, and this may be a discussion for later, is what kind of reporting do we need back as we transfer this infrastructure? If we vote to transfer this infrastructure, what kind of reporting do we need, and on what basis, to see how this project is going, again, if we are stewards of the infrastructure? So that's maybe a kind of a broader question, maybe for Director Spencer or Chair Hogan. And that's it.
It's a great point about accountability for the operation of this facility, and the goal being that this is a temporary approach. This is not intended to be a long-term approach, and that we need to establish what are the benchmarks and the metrics we're going to be measuring and reporting on, and that reporting will be done, you know, in a fully public, transparent way at the City Council. So we will certainly share that with the commission as part of our, you know, dissemination of information. And you know, I believe we can be successful. This model has worked elsewhere, but we're prepared to make adjustments and mid-course corrections if the need arises, if the experience shows that we need to change the way we're doing it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. That's all.
All right, Commissioner Overby.
I had extensive communication with CETA Director Pine, and I shared that as in a document, which obviously got distributed late to you today. But so I'm going to assume nobody has had an opportunity to see it. And I have concerns, and they were expressed in my questions. And my first question, yes, you know, maybe Public Works role is the Public Works Department, the Public Works Commission is just the role of, is this a good thing to change that parking lot to a homeless shanty town? And have we adequately provided for the people that are currently, you know, paying for parking there, primarily the federal building employees? So maybe that people think that's all we should be thinking about. And I sort of agree with Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco that that I really want to look at in a more holistic way. The questions that I had that would have helped me to feel more comfortable about this. I think that the concept of the shelter pods is an excellent concept. I think, unfortunately, I do not think that the concern I have and the questions I originally asked were of the housing services, the homeless services folks, who was consulted about this particular location, and second, how many of the people that say were living at the Sears Lane encampment or other homeless people were actually consulted about the locations where they might want these pods to be located. Because my sense is that that we are sort of housed people that are making a decision about houseless people wanting to live in that sort of a clustered arrangement in a parking lot with these pods. And I honestly don't feel like that information has been adequately assessed, whether or not this is really going to be something that the people that are intended to be living there will choose to want to live there. So I was actually very concerned when I learned that was, and honestly, Director Pine was very honest with me and said that they, in the interest of doing this very quickly, there was no conversations with these folks from Sears Lane that have been, evicted from that location, and there weren't conversations about the location, or part of the decision making wasn't done through the social service homeless population, the services. So my proposal would be actually, and I'm going to just propose this and I'm going to continue, we want to continue the discussion, but that we really need to have more information about this. And as I do hear, the discussion is still going on about how it's going to be managed and maintained and who's going to do it. But really my primary concern from the start was that people who are homeless have unusual ways of choosing to live, that they may not find that an attractive way of living. And I could be wrong, but I really do not think that we have thought that out. One of my questions, and in the context of the communication that I did have, was communication from the downtown businesses and managers and their input on this. And their question is, one of mine was, why don't we space these pods in spaced out locations where people might find that they would actually prefer to live? And so the answer was, well, this is just the best place for water and wastewater and connections to things. So I feel like that needs to be done. And I feel like I can't make a decision of deciding to approve this without feeling like that we really have a chance of success with it. So that information, to me, needs to be part of what we need as a commission before we make this kind of a decision. That's just my opinion. I did ask about the other 9 locations. So those are in the communication. Director Pine did give me that. So you can get that if you want to know where those locations are. So I know that was asked in the public forum. I assume, I think Director Pine, you were going to actually mention those, and I could read them, but they are in the paperwork that I communicated to the other commissioners. I did have specific questions that were related, that are follow-up. One of them, the first one is, will the Community Resource Center be relocated? I understand it will. And are you planning to build a new facility that will replace the services that are now available at the behind the, at the Community Resource Center there at the Veterans, the VA building? That'll have, it's the Legion Hall, I guess, there on South Winooski. So that's my first question. Are you planning to build a replacement for the facility, the Community Resource Center, that will have, the same sort of services? And I'm not sure if they have showers and laundry facilities and down there, but that's my first question.
Sure. The Community Resource Center has been operating for the last, really since, as Marcella said at the beginning of the pandemic, at the location of the VFW on South Winooski Avenue. That lease is coming up and ending And they do not desire to continue because there's going to be a redevelopment of that property, and that redevelopment work needs to begin. So that is not a permanent location for the Community Resource Center. And actually, Paul Dragon, the executive director of CBOEO that operates the Community Resource Center, is here with us tonight. You can talk a little bit about the desire to have a higher quality location, higher quality facility. And so the plan is to actually develop a modular unit that will be quite a bit larger than the pods that are planned to be located and co-located with the pods on Elmwood Avenue. And that would be, you know, a staffed facility with the range of supports and services that one can get at the Community Resource Center today, which serves a really important function in providing people with really basic day-to-day resources and warmth and other needs, but also connection to housing assistance, housing search assistance, healthcare, meals, all the things that folks need to at least have a level of dignity that I think everyone would agree is essential to living in a civilized society. So the Community Resource Center will be relocated and included as a co-located facility here. And I just want to answer the point that Commissioner Overby raised about multiple locations, which I get. I think I understand the concept there. But we also have an obligation as public officials to be mindful of the public dollar, and the costs of creating multiple facilities not only has much bigger capital costs for infrastructure, but the operating costs of staffing multiple facilities is something that we're really mindful of. So we're really trying to be mindful of those facts. And I think the last thing I want to say is, I think the overarching question that you've raised is sort of like the field of dreams. If we build it, will they come? I don't think anyone has a crystal ball. However, what we've seen in other jurisdictions across the country is you don't just build pods and say, come and get them. You provide real access to, you know, a quality living environment with management, with structure, with security, with all the amenities, but also make it really clear that there are certain expectations about what type of behavior will be acceptable. And so you've created an environment of, you know, sort of mutual respect for one another. And I think Paul can also speak to the idea that homeless population will reject this location or the type of housing that the shelter that we're creating. I think Paul, if he can be promoted, can speak to some of these issues because he has a more day-to-day experience with this than any of us. So if Paul could speak, that'd be great. If he's now a panelist, so he's ready to go.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Paul Dragon, I'm with the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. We've been providing services at the VFW since its inception. I think, as Brian said, that is coming to an end very soon. We have seen a tremendous need for the Community Resource Center. We provide hot meals there every day. In January, we provided 3,000 meals to people, so just an incredible need. We have housing advocates there, computers. People are able to connect to benefits, get into coordinated entry so they could start to access vouchers, and also get connections to just other resources. It's been really invaluable. And there's been a tremendous sense of community built up there. People go there to make connections with each other. We had a wedding there the other day. Two people chose to have their wedding at the Community Resource Center. We have haircut clinics and vaccine clinics, and we have medical services coming in. So anyway, I think it's providing a really valuable resource. I was excited about the potential for a new Community Resource Center because we don't have showers. At the new one, there'd be an ADA shower. There'd be a washer and a dryer, which, as you can imagine, is a huge need. There would be counseling space, which we don't have now. There'd be office space, which we don't have now. It would be much nicer, newer, more modern. There'd be a deck. People can get some fresh air. You know, our staff is very skilled at providing services and connecting with people. I think, you know, we're not planning on, we're planning on running and operating the Community Resource Center. We were not planning on doing that with the village. I did think it was a good idea, though, to co-locate those two things, since the folks at the village would have access not only to the Community Resource Center, but we have a street outreach team with a mobile outreach unit that works and goes around to all the different encampments, and they're often at the resource center to connect with people. So we could leverage all the food we provide, all the care we provide, all the outreach we provide. And if I think they'd have a lot more support, is what I'm saying, if it is co-located with the Community Resource Center. That's what I think. I think you make really good points about aggregating people together. You know, as folks who want community integration, we think that's so important. And we know there have been very, very large encampments. With Sears Lane is a perfect example. There were 30 people there. And there's been other very large encampments where people have come together, mostly for the feeling of safety and not wanting to be isolated and making connections. So I worry about that, because we always want people in scattered sites integrated into the community. However, this is kind of an emergency issue. We have homeless numbers increasing, a lot of it due to the pandemic. So I think, to Marcella's point, it's like an emergency housing program. And I think the time limit is geared until we get more housing stock in place, 36 months, where we're supposed to get a lot more housing in place, and maybe more of our homeless infrastructure. That would give us some time. So I respect everybody's point here and concerns. I think they're super valid, and I think outreach is really, really important to the neighborhood and the community, and mutually reinforcing. How do we do this work so that everybody's connecting with each other, people in the village and people in the surrounding area, so everybody feels a part of this. I do think, I know our outreach folks, like, we didn't specifically ask about a village. I think anecdotally people know that, our folks know that a lot of people are just staying outside. We see it every morning as they come into the Community Resource Center. Cases of frostbite in the winter, people hungry. It's just on and on, victims and survivors of domestic violence. So anecdotally, there is a need for sure. There's no doubt, because otherwise people are staying, either in aggregate encampments or scattered encampments. But there's been no I know our team is not, we just recently learned of this as well. But we do have the resource center where we see how people are living, how they're struggling, how they're trying to connect. And I know there's a need for emergency shelter. I think it's a great question. Is this the kind of housing? And I think the answer is, it's not the kind of housing that CVOEO wants or anybody wants, right? I think the city's goal, the mayor's goal, is to house everybody eventually and permanently. And it's very sad that we're just not in that place right now.
Just, if I can just add to that, thanks very much, Paul, for talking to the operations and the work that you've been doing over at the CRC for the last 2 years. And in case I wasn't clear before, it's the information that we're getting from our partnership with CVOEO at the CRC. It's the information that we're getting from other partners that are working in shelter provision and housing provision, and also in outreach, that's really informed the development and kind of framing this response. We've created this because of the information that we've received from folks experiencing homelessness, and from the service providers and the shelter providers and housing providers. This isn't a permanent solution. This isn't permanent housing. It's intended to be infill until we get to the point of some of these permanent housing developments being completed, which we see will be coming in the next 2 to 3 years, as ARPA funds are being expended. across the state to develop new housing. There was another one. Oh, sorry, and it's also more than anecdotal around folks' responses to it. We've, you know, I've had one person already directly ask me how we can get on the list to get into the shelters, and I know that from another shelter there have been 2 or 3 people again already asking. So as people are starting to talk about it, we're already getting folks asking how we're going to be doing our prioritizations.
Thank you for that context.
So
Mr. Dragon as well. Commissioner Overby, is there, I guess you want to summarize from
so the question was still, is the plan then to build a structure for the replacement of the community resource center that has showers and washing facilities and a meeting room and place to do feeding in the parking lot?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
The plan is to design and construct a modular community resource center that will be placed in the parking lot, and when that's no longer the right location for it, can be moved to another location.
So it would be connect. Okay, so that answers that question, and that's going to have shower and laundry facilities and those sorts of things.
Offices and a kitchen. Yep.
Okay. The one of the questions that I had is what, I know you say you're still discussing what agencies are going to be responsible for managing this. Do you have, so you don't have any commitments from anybody at this point, or do you have some signed commitments? That I know the reason I'm asking the question is because nobody wanted to help manage the Sears Lane encampment. So I'm just wondering how, whether you have commitments from organizations that would be the ones that are hoping to be managing the rules.
Sure. I think that, I'll use a tired expression, but Sears Lane and Elmwood Avenue are apples to oranges, really. They really aren't the same thing. And the plan for Elmwood Avenue is a well thought out plan and is proven elsewhere to work. So we are talking with organizations to serve this role. The CVOEO will continue in the role of staffing the Community Resource Center, but we're talking with other organizations, and so I just leave it at that. Really, that's where we're at.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to wrap it up with, I've had other people suggest the spacing out of the pods. I know you've probably all heard of the Mad Housers in Chicago, which basically built the shelter pods, and they placed them in the places where the houseless people were actually living, so that they could make their own little nest the way they wanted to make it in their own private way that they wanted to do it. And my concern is that, again, I'm going to stop after this. However, I feel like we all, as people that are housed, are thinking up something that actually sounds great from the perspective of people who are home, who have homes, and thinking that this is going to be the solution for people that don't have them. And I spend quite a few times, believe it or not, I do speak with people that are homeless all the time, and they clearly have interests in having their own independence, and so we have different impression of their choices in life. And I don't presume to feel like making a shanty village that is clean and tidy the way that I would want it, perhaps, is going to be appealing to the people. So I really feel like we really need to do a better job of asking people. And I do. And one of the suggestions that was made to me, spreading them around the community and making it so that even a portion of them could be rented, like the Airbnb kind of thing that we're talking about, that would pay for some of the other costs of managing them, and not stigmatize people that are going to be living in this parking lot. So that's where I'm at. I really feel like we need more interaction with the people that might be proposed to live in this community, so they can actually contribute to making it into a community that they want. They wanted a community like Sears Lane. That was working. I don't think it was working for other people. However, we need to be able to integrate them into making decisions about how they want to be housed. That's my perception on this. So That's my take on it. Thank you for indulging in my questions. And thank you, Brian, for your prompt response on everything. And it would be helpful if you want to help people understand where the other locations are. But the other commissioners do have that information. I did share that with them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Thank you. Yeah, I taking on this particular challenge, I know we're, as a commission, really only focusing on the question at hand, on our work at hand. But as both of the previous commissioners, I think, rightly asked, all the other questions that are kind of posed for us. When I first saw this proposal, I immediately was thinking about the Old North End Community Center, where I do a lot of work with many of my community partners, or my kid went to daycare. And then I looked at the series of the other proposed locations, and I was thinking about, connections I have to each of those. We live in a pretty small city. There's really no place that we don't have some kind of connection with, and we don't, I think, see the same kinds of questions that you've seen from public comment, and that you've seen raised by fellow commissioners as well. I don't know what the sequencing of all of this is. You've sort of led off part of your own comments by saying, you're not quite at the space of saying, giving us all the details that I think people, understandably want. And so I kind of understand that. My sense is that until you have, part of these decisions in place, it's hard to move to the next one. As I understand it, that's where our role as a commission comes in simply decommissioning this parking lot. So I have a couple of specific questions on those lines. I did want to say that my sense of the urgency of this, because I've seen a couple of questions where people have raised, what is the rush? Why is this coming up so quickly? My sense, certainly from a lot of the things that you have presented here, there is a rush. This isn't something that we can simply sit and wait on and come up with the best possible solutions. There are all kinds of reasons. There are time pressures on here, and I think perhaps you might restate some of those, because I see even in public comment, a couple of those questions have come up. And I also appreciate that it's very clear, as Marcella mentioned in her remarks, that you are having conversations with a number of different people. It may not have been at the speed that some people may have wanted, but I appreciate that these are also ongoing. This isn't just sort of a one and done. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for that. I guess the couple of questions, you kind of answered one of them already in terms of the modular nature of the resource center, that if and when other locations end up being, whatever this ends up in the long run, that those kinds of resources could be moved elsewhere. So that was one thing I had kind of wondered about. So I think that that's fairly clear, just if you can confirm that. The other thing is that, you've kind of talked about this as a short-term emergency, kind of effort. So what we're being asked to do in terms of the decommissioning, I'm sorry if I missed this, is there a time limit on this? And is the intent then to move, and I guess this is a question more for Jeff, would we then move the, whatever it is, the people who are using it now, the legal whatever, would we be moving them back to this site? So this would be decommissioned and then recommissioned. So just a technical question on that front. So those are just my questions. Thanks.
The request is for a decommissioning of the lot for 3 years and a parking agreement in the Lakeview College Street garage to house those parkers from Elmwood in the Lakeview College Street garage for 3 years.
Okay, but then to then move them back to that. I was just wondering.
Ostensibly, yes.
Okay, all right, okay. So yeah, that was really it. Other than that, I mean, I just don't. there's no easy way to deal with a situation like this that doesn't end up being either kind of a NIMBY as, you know, sort of like, well, we want to deal with this issue, but we want to deal with it somewhere else. And that's something that I've thought about. Like, we keep telling the city to deal with this issue, but if we come up with innovative solutions and all we find are problems with those attempts to, you know, act in good faith to deal with that, how are we ever going to address these? I completely understand the concerns, and I really echo a lot of what people want as assurances. I have some faith that a lot of that is continuing to be worked out, but you know, I think we have to. Anyway, that's it. I'm just ranting at this point. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner Kennedy.
Yeah, so a lot of my points have already been touched on, which is great. I do just have one clarifying question left, which I apologize if this has already been said or something, but I did do a quick Google search just to figure it out, and the top articles didn't mention it. Will there be any sort of cost to the residents of these pods to stay there?
No.
Nope. Covered by our development costs are covered, and the operating costs are covered by the federal funds as part of the American Recovery Plan Act that the city is receiving. This issue came out as the top ranked issue in the survey. Responses of almost 4,000 surveys on dealing with homelessness was identified. So this is in response to that.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And then I did just want to touch on some of the public, like the concerns from the public that we heard earlier and have seen in emails regarding neighborhood safety, by just emphasizing that the houseless people in our community are already residents of our neighborhoods. They're just living in far more dangerous and unstable conditions, and providing this like type of housing, even if it is just temporary, is essential right now. It is an emergency, and we can work on long-term solutions while we provide that housing temporarily. So I'm fully in support of this proposition, and thank you.
All right, thank you. So just, yeah, a couple points on my end. This one, I think you just touched on it, Director Pine. Do you have a sense of the rough breakdown in the cost between like acquiring pods versus administering, staffing them on the road?
Luckily, we have a housing developer in our midst here, so Samantha can tell you how this breaks out.
Yes, so right now, the total development capital costs for the infrastructure, the 30 shelters, the bathhouse unit will provide 6 full bathrooms with sinks, toilets, and showers for the residents of the community, is estimated at about $750,000. The operating costs are estimated at about $850,000 over 3 years. So I think, as Director Pine stated, some of those, all of the capital costs would be covered by the ARPA funds. The City Council committed those funds to this project in February, and a portion of the operating costs as well. As Marcella mentioned, the majority of the operating costs would be covered through state grant funding through the Office of Economic Opportunity. For the Community Resource Center, we anticipate another $250,000 to $300,000 of capital costs. Again, that's to build a custom modular resource center that will be connected to power, water, and sewer, designed to be energy efficient, hopefully designed to produce some of its own energy, and to best serve the population that Paul spoke eloquently to.
Great, thank you.
Congratulate directors. We also recently received $365,000 in congressionally directed spending for the Community Resource Center as a grant award that we heard about last week.
Yeah, to operate the Community Resource Center.
And that's the new term for earmarks.
Noted, thank you. And thanks for the reminder that there was the community's surveys distributed last year. It sounds like you got quite a number of responses, and quite a number of responses emphasizing this need, or the need that this effort is addressing. And I note that, of course, it's not going to be perfect. It may not be a preferred housing option for everyone, but I believe that it is a nice option for many, and will be serving many people. And I appreciate the city's commitment to continue to, respond to needs and concerns as they come up along the way here. But yeah, I think this is an exciting and innovative option. And in general, I think we should be housing people and not vehicles. So this is a nice trade-off. It's not perfect, but it is, I think, a nice solution here. That is all on my end. Unfortunately, lost Commissioner Bard is feeling ill and had to step out. So with that, I will close the commissioner discussion for now and open up public comment. We do still have a number of attendees from the public here, so ask Mr. Golding to help us navigate sign-ins and participants, and I will ask members of the public who are interested in speaking to please keep their remarks brief, to 3 minutes or less.
Thanks, Chair Hogan. There are folks online who have raised their hand, and for anyone else who is online and would like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, or *9 if anybody is still called in. The folks in the room are no longer here, so we'll start online with Nicholas Pena.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, and appreciate all of your time this evening. So, I really would like to address the CEDO staff here, as well as all of the commissioners. And, Chair Hogan, you mentioned that this is a trade-off between housing people and parking. I urge you to think larger than that. This is not just a parking lot. This is an area of the city where hundreds of families live. To the CEDO staff, I recognize and I appreciate the effort to help provide temporary housing for the homeless. However, I am adamantly opposed to the location site, the pod proposal. I do not think that this has been a well thought out plan. I believe that Chair O'Neill Vivanco hit the nail on the head in that the approach here has really not been respectful or fair. CEDO did not ask the commission's permission prior to moving forward with this, nor did they reach out to neighbors and property owners. I did hear that, yesterday you mentioned that you reached out to one of the property owners. In our company, which provides low-income housing to people in Burlington, we own 61 Elmwood, which directly touches this parking lot. No one reached out to me. No one reached out to my property manager. And so I disagree that you've reached out to owners and neighbors. I also agree with Commissioner Overby's statements that, this is somewhat of a premature proposal, and that a shanty village will not be appealing to the homeless. I also, I find it degrading. I think that you need to think from their perspective, this would almost further ostracize these people. The last thing I want to say is that, I speak obviously as a property owner, but I'm also representing numerous families that live directly on this parking lot in various buildings. And this week, we had a young mother call me and my property manager. She has 2 young children that she lives with in the apartment that directly looks on to this parking lot. She called in tears, truly frightened. She has 2 young daughters who regularly walk home on Elmwood Avenue. This poses a serious threat to safety. The fact that this, proposed shanty village is going to be a wet facility that allows drinking, inevitably drugs, if we're all, sort of being real here. This has huge ramifications. It's far bigger than replacing a parking lot. We need to think about the community here. So I urge all of you to, and respectfully ask you to put yourself in her shoes. And with that, I just want to, again, speak for the families that live in these buildings. This has much larger ramifications, and I urge you to please think about the big picture. Thank you.
You.
I think, we did try to reach all the adjacent property owners, and this property was identified as an LLC. So we would love to, CETA would love to have an opportunity to get your contact information and communicate with you directly. So I don't know, you can, provide it to the Public Works Commission and they can pass it on to CETA, but that would be really helpful for us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Chair Hogan, next in queue, we have Damon is signed up.
Welcome, Damon. Please state your last name for our records as well.
My name is Damon Lane, and I live just a bit further than the property that was just referenced, and about half my windows look out on this property. And that's a 4-unit building that I also own. And I'm completely supportive of addressing this urgent need and think this would be a better use of that site than parking. I do think we probably need a variety of solutions, that not everyone would like this community, kind of a dense situation, but this is a start and we can do other things too. I think in the longer run, it'd be great to see that property do even more and keep this kind of thing going, but also add mixed income mixed income housing and other kind of community needs like daycare. But, we're getting well outside the Commission's purview there. And I just want to say, with people's comments about the, noise or other things, living here, there's plenty of noise, and, the college student housing, those aren't, I'm not that worried about the pod shelters adding to this any more than, some of the existing properties. So I guess I'm just wanting to say I'm a nearby person, lives here, property owner, not that worried about this, and looking forward to more discussion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lane.
Next in queue is Janelle Pena.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Janelle Pena. I am a former state worker at DCF under the Agency of Human Services. So I have a really strong appreciation for providing resources to people in need in our community. With that being said, I'm also an owner of the building at 61 Elmwood, closest to the parking lot, and also a mom to 3 young children. So I can understand some of our tenants' concerns around safety, specifically for young families and having young kids nearby. I've read that this is a wet encampment, which is concerning. And I now, knowing that the Community Resource Center is going to be co-located, and that's understandably a priority, it also speaks to the fact that there will be a lot of people outside going back and forth between pods in that resource center, which again speaks to the debris and potentially dangerous things that could impact the people who live nearby. And I'd like to know what you are doing and the policies and regulations you plan to put in place to make sure that the area stays safe, that it stays clean, and that there is, something that can help the people who live nearby feel safer around the community.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Chair Hogan, no one else is in queue, but Commissioner Barr did send me public comment from the BBA that he said he was going to bring forward, and I think indicated if I could either share it on screen or read it. It sounded like that's what his interest was, if that's favorable to you.
Sure.
Commissioner Barr shared this with me, comments from the Burlington Business Association. Thanks for the chat this morning. I want to share an additional update with you. The Church Street Marketplace Commission voted unanimously this morning that they were not supportive of the location chosen, while still supporting plans for an emergency shelter pod community this summer. Also below, there are specific concerns about the downtown location that we have shared with the mayor and Brian Pine for your awareness. I think the rest of this is going to put me over the 3-minute limit, so I'd certainly be happy to share this with you directly and put it online or continue to read at your discretion.
Yeah, thank you for the the summary of the remarks there, Mr. Golding. If you want to sort of post it for our records, that would be great. I do see we have one other hand in the virtual layer here as well.
Yeah, now Kelly Devine is in queue, so we'll promote you over to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Devine. I'm the Executive Director of the Burlington Business Association. And while we did email Jim that information we got from the commission meeting this morning, those comments are not, please don't consider those official comments from the Burlington Business Association. If we have some to make, we'll send them to the commission directly.
All right.
Question about people who are in the room.
Mr. Golding, anyone else for public comment here?
There is no one else in queue.
Great, thank you for that. So with that, I'll bring it back.
Chair Hogan, could I just ask one question? That is, there were members of the community and the public who were in the room at 645 Pine that I think had their hand up and they actually left. If you have contact information for them, I would appreciate getting it so we can follow up with them directly because they had questions I don't think we were able to address, and I just want to be responsive to those. So I don't know if Rob, you're there. I think you're there, Rob, so maybe you gathered some info.
Yeah, Director Pine, I took their email address down. I shared with them the correspondence between you and Commissioner Overby, which satisfied a few questions they had. And then they had one additional question they left me with that I was going to send over to you folks to follow up on, which essentially was a question about why the Burlington School District parking lot that's not in use currently wasn't on the site selection list. And so I'd be happy to share that with you so you can get back to them.
Yeah, thank you for checking on that, Director Pine. All right, I will bring it back to the commission at this point. We are requested to take action on this item. I'd welcome a motion if anyone has one.
I'll make a motion to support the recommendation.
Right, we have a motion from Commissioner Bose. Thank you for that.
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner Kennedy. Thank you. Is there any discussion around that motion? Commissioner Overby.
I just wanted to point out that we received a communication from the U.S. Attorney's Office requesting that not, if you do this, that it's not just the existing permit holders that get to move themselves over, but anybody in the next 3 years that's working at the U.S. Attorney's Office gets to have the ability to get a parking permit at the college and Lakeview parking lot. The federal employees use that parking lot, and having been a federal employee, I can tell you that they have fear walking to that parking lot. So there's going to be fear trying to find another place to get to as well. So I just wanted to point out that we did get that communication, and I think the wording of the proposal may or may not address that. And maybe Assistant Director Paget, you can address that, whether that would be an acceptable adjustment to your proposal.
They wouldn't get parking in the Elmwood lot now anyway. That parking lot is massively oversubscribed. There's 111 permits and there's only 70 spaces. So the attorney's office, if they ask us for a permit in that lot, we wouldn't give it to them for the foreseeable future anyway. So there's really no change.
Yeah. So if a U.S. Attorney's Office employee leaves and they hire somebody new, that person will not get a parking spot anyway. Okay.
Lakeview College. Yep.
Right.
I think what I understand Assistant Director, Division Director Jeff Paget to say is that there's a certain number for the attorney's office, and that if one person leaves and another comes, then up to that number that we can accommodate. Is that correct?
I don't think we can. I think if anybody, I mean, it's a little complicated because this is a legacy issue that I'm trying to deal with. But the way I've imagined it is if somebody leaves the lot, we don't bring anybody else in, period. We don't have formal relationships that say the U.S. attorney has an allocation of 20 spaces or 30 spaces or whatever they have. So we're treating everybody equal in that lot, regardless of their, I mean, people don't leave because they know that it's oversubscribed and they want to have that parking. So this will be an interesting 3-year period of, what attrition happens and how we manage this to make it fair. So,
Right. They just have a danger factor as well. It's like the safety factor of parking when they have to leave at night. And the FBI, the other agencies that are in that building as well have the same safety factor. So I was just wanting to make sure that you were aware of that letter, and obviously you are. So that's the answer that they get
for today.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion around the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll go to a vote. Commissioner Bose.
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Gotcha. Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Aye.
Commissioner Overby.
No.
An aye for myself. Motion passes by a vote of 4-1. All right, thank you all for the work on this one, and yeah, certainly look forward to and wish you the best in pushing this, advancing this forward and collaborating with.
Thanks for the time. Both the commission and Jeff Paget put a lot of time into this with Samantha figuring this out. So I just want to thank staff. Thank you very much. We'll keep you posted as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Moving forward, Director Spencer, what do you say? We good for an asset management update?
Yes, indeed. And given the hour, we will move expeditiously. This is a request from commissioners. I know talking to Chair Hogan, who was interested in hearing an update on our multi-departmental, multi-year asset management effort to do a better job to maintain our infrastructure. I'm really pleased to have 2 stellar members of our team here, Gustav Sexauer and Rocky Vogler, who are asset management leads within DPW. I regret to say that Gustav is moving out west, and so this will be his last month with us. And so I know the agenda was a little long, but this will be kind of last chance to hear from our expert before he heads out west. And thanks to Rocky for agreeing to continue the momentum in Gustav's absence. So with that, I'll turn it over for their short presentation. No action is needed tonight.
All right, are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Got it, thank you.
Great. So yeah, I'm Gustav Sexauer. I'm the Asset Management GIS Coordinator, and I've got Rocky Vogler here, who's the Water Resources Asset Manager. And we've been implementing ViewWorks over the past year. So if you recall, a little over a year ago, you had supported us in acquiring ViewWorks, which is a asset management software made by DTS. And in many of the slides you're going to see here, you'll see some screenshots of our actual system. So just a quick recap on asset management and why we're doing this. We're doing it so that we can give the highest level of service to our residents for the least cost. And how do we do that? We're using asset management to gather data on our asset life cycles and work histories so that we have good data on how we did things in the past to make informed decisions for the future, where we'll have good numbers to base those decisions on. And additionally, we're trying to have departments work together and capture data in a similar way so that you can have more apples to apples comparison across teams. So what have we been doing over the past year? The implementation has consisted of configuring the ViewWorks site for our teams. We worked extensively with them to work on their current workflows and see how they would work with how the system is set up for the chain of command, which you'll get a better look into in a minute. We were gathering data from old systems to migrate into ViewWorks and determining what sorts of requests and work we would be tracking and which asset inventories would be important to have in this system. And we also have done some technology upgrades. So we've got new mobile devices in the hands of field staff so that they're able to use ViewWorks to record work in the field better and also to look at asset information. And then the last item is just training. We started out with all teams got to have a 2-week block of training with DTS. And from there, Rocky and I have been following up with all the teams and coaching them along and getting them comfortable using the system as they got their feet wet with it. And in addition to just ViewWorks itself, we've integrated several different software with it, SeeClickFix being the most important one. It is our service requests outlet for the public, and those requests are coming in through our customer service representatives, and they're sending them into ViewWorks so that we can see them alongside internal requests. We can easily make work orders from those requests and attach them to assets. And it's given us kind of a holistic system, including those requests. In addition to that software, we have Granite XP, which is a way that video is captured for collection system assets, and ViewWorks is able to link assets out to those recordings. And so there's broader accessibility to see those recordings. With Paver, we are setting up a way so that the pavement condition can be added into ViewWorks and visualized there, and DigSafe requests that come in will be able to be turned into work orders automatically for those crews to follow up on marking work. And then for Civic Rec, that's a Parks Department software, and automatic work orders will be coming out and spaces get rented out. And I didn't put it on this list, but I also wanted to mention that we integrated with our sign-ons for our network with the city, so that we didn't have to have people remembering one more password to use ViewWorks. One other thing that was a big leap forward for the city was that when we were early on in the implementation last spring, we realized that our GIS system needed to be upgraded to properly work with ViewWorks, and our city servers on site were also aging, and we'd been looking to replace them for a few years. So we made the jump to a cloud-hosted environment and cloud managed services. So we have a new enterprise portal that we have our authoritative data shared with from a new cloud server. And that's proving to be a good way for a city to access, for the city staff to access authoritative GIS data. And in this migration process, we did a lot of data cleanup. It was a good opportunity to review what was where and what was scattered around. And then we also got more staff trained on using ArcGIS Pro, which is the newer and more advanced desktop version of GIS that's replacing ArcMap. And I just wanted to share a quick example of how ViewWorks and asset management can really be a boon for our residents. So we did have someone come into the parking services team who thought they wrongfully were given a ticket for being at a meter that was broken. The parking services team was able to look and see that the traffic team had done a work order addressing a problem with the meter the same day that the person had gotten the ticket. And so it was a confirmation that they were able to get on quick reporting without even going into the field, and they were able to forgive the ticket to the person before they left the office. So I'm going to hand it over to Rocky to finish the presentation.
Good evening to the commissioners. Good evening, Chapin. My name is Rocky Vogler. I'm the asset manager in the Water Division of Public Works Department. And so pulling back the covers just a little bit to give you a peek inside of ViewWorks, essentially what we do is we build inventories of all of our assets as shown in the lower right of this slide. It's an example of the water treatment plant, and you see kind of a folder structure there. And we've got assets nested within other asset types. And so it kind of creates a hierarchy that allows us to effectively organize all of our different assets depending on either the type of facility that's involved or the type of system that is included. And so what we do with that information that we store is we process service requests and work orders against those assets. Now, service requests, keep in mind, typically come in from the general public. They can issue a service request using See-Click-Fix, or they can call us up directly and we can process the service request on their behalf. The service request then gets routed to a particular group or a single person. And that person then, after they determine what the issue is, then performs work on a particular asset. So at that point, a work order is created. And so what we're doing is we're tracking all of the service requests and work orders against a particular asset. In addition to that, when we do work orders, we can also track condition. And I think it was mentioned in one of the earlier items in your agenda tonight, when we're looking at assessing risk. One of the things that we do is we use condition and we create scoring metrics to apply to those assets so that we can compare one asset to another asset within the same class and determine which one has a higher priority in terms of devoting capital dollars or operation dollars to maintaining those assets. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick overview on how a process like this might work, say for example, a customer saw, it's the summertime, they saw water running down the gutter. Well, they could go on See-Click-Fix, issue a service request. In this case, that would come into our customer care staff that work in the water department. They would make sure that the category was appropriately selected, and then they would forward that information to the appropriate manager. So in this case, the water distribution manager would get that request. He would dispatch somebody on one of his crews to go out. They would engage in completing the work. They would process a work order in ViewWorks and attach it to that particular asset. So if we had a broken pipe, that pipe now has a work order associated with it that has a bunch of information that can be queried later on. And so the manager then reviews the work order to verify that it's complete and correct. And then what happens to close the loop with the resident is that we provide comment within the service request, and that pushes back out to See-Click-Fix so that the person understands that the city has responded to their issue and they get to see what it is exactly that we've done in that response. Next slide. So as you can imagine, there have been quite a few entities involved in this project up to this point. Gustav mentioned a little bit earlier about the hosting that we're doing with GIS, that's Axim Geospatial. We contracted with DTS to use their ViewWorks product. KCI Technologies assisted us as a consultant. They were there during the actual selection process when we were determining which asset management product we wanted to go with. Of course, we have multiple departments across the city that have been involved in this, and multiple divisions and sections within those departments. So it's been a very wide-reaching project and will continue to be. Next slide, please. A couple of things that are interesting right now on the mobile app side of things. So we can do this work on our desktop computers. We can also do it out in the field using the mobile apps. We have the ability currently to do work orders out in the field, but we don't have the ability to process service requests in the field. We can only do that from the desktop. So very soon, DTS will be releasing a new mobile application to allow us to work with service requests in the field, which will be really helpful. Right now, we kind of have a workaround process to help us process service requests into work orders, even though we can't see those service requests in the field. We're wrapping up our implementation of the project, and then we'll be going into closeout, at which point the real challenge for the city is going to be to continue doing effective training to get people more familiar with the software. And that's a process that will be ongoing for some time. There have been certain groups within the city that have had an easier entry point into the software for multiple reasons. And so moving forward, we'll continue to keep our foot on the gas pedal to get more folks brought into the fold. At the end of the day, what we're really shooting for here is for all of our resource managers, you know, that are running groups of people or divisions and departments to see all of their staff fully engaged in this process, because the real beauty behind asset management is as we get data rich, we can start asking some really pointed and important questions of the software and allow us to make some really good business decisions on how to spend limited capital and operating dollars to best effect. And that's really what we're after here with asset management. Next slide. I think that slide speaks for itself.
Great, thanks so much for the presentation here. I'll open them up for discussion among my fellow commissioners. I'll start with Commissioner Overby.
I am very excited by this, and I have been excited about asset management for years. So I'm really excited that you're getting it going. I recognized your comment about the training and ongoing training is going to be important. But I think it's exciting. There's a lot to be that people are going to be able to do. I hope that you can get people excited in the city, all the city departments, that as long as each one of them can find something of value, that, you know, that's worth their effort of doing the learning and also worth their effort of putting in content, because a lot of times these kind of things get to be annoying because people are just asking you to put data in and coding this and entering that, and the actual person doing that gets no value from themselves, and that's a downward spiral of the information becoming outdated and useless. So I realize we're at the beginning of this, and I'm very excited. I know Director Spencer has been like working on this and promoting this for years and years and years, and I've been always supporting it. So I'm really very excited, and thank you for the report on this. I can see a lot of potential in it, and I know you're going to be on the hook here since Mr. Sexauer is going to be heading away, but hopefully we'll get somebody else in there to help you out, and this will be a real valuable asset in the community. And at a certain point, I hope that some of this information in the GIS format is going to be accessible to the general public. One just quick question was, who are you using as the cloud service provider?
For GIS, that's Axum Geospatial.
Okay, so that's, yeah, you're not using one of the big, big ones. So that's great. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. I don't know whether they're using AWS in the background or what, I was just curious about that.
It's Azure in the background.
It's
I
Azure
believe.
in the background. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Thank you for the presentation. I have no questions. Thanks.
Kennedy.
Thank you. I also have no questions, but that was a very informative rundown. I appreciate it.
All right. Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
No questions, just a comment. First, thank you. And I love to see that this kind of investment kind of is paying off for, for myriad teams. And keep up the staff training. I feel like it's really important to also to what Commissioner Overby said is, the more people who can use it and see value in it for their pieces of projects, the more buy-in. So great job. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Quick question, is all the data in there at this point? Like your pipe break history and all this stuff, or you're still sort of transitioning some data in there?
We have all of the data upload that we need to do at this point is essentially completed. And we will be adding additional data as we move forward in time, but the building blocks for all of it is there. So you might imagine that, I'll give you a quick example at the water treatment plant. I have some data fields that allow a user to input the model number and manufacturer name for a pump, for example. We may not have all of that currently populated, but as we're doing work orders on those assets, then we can grab that additional data and know specifically what we have, what year something got installed. So it's the attributes related to the assets that will continue to get populated.
Great, thank you. And thanks for the anecdote earlier about bringing some of these early wins to life and checking the meter repair history in an integrated way. That's all great stuff. And I look forward to sort of enabling even more of those analysis questions down the road. Just, out of curiosity, is the BTV stat platform still a thing for us to be sort of telling data-driven stories for the city overall?
Yes, generally, we took a hiatus during COVID. The process has restarted. Yes, we are in the midst of that. I do really see that the asset management software is going to enable us to do a much more sophisticated deep dive into our data. As Rocky and Gustav pointed out, there is some data that, will become more valuable the longer trend data we have in the system. So, we're still in the building mode. We've brought as much forward as we've had easily collectible, but to be honest, there are certain assets that were recorded on pen and paper for years that are in filing cabinets, and that information has not been brought in at this time. So, I think the real value of this is going to build over time.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. Does pavement condition include the like the sidewalk condition inventory that we did a while back?
We have two types of analysis: PCI, pavement condition index, and SCI, sidewalk condition index. Two different tools we use. We've just finished a citywide sidewalk assessment and be happy to report on that in the future. But two different tools, both of which will be in this asset management software.
Great. No, thanks so much. And Leslie, out of curiosity, I was wondering what the license situation is. Do you have like a certain number of licenses for DPW, for parks?
So the nice thing about ViewWorks is that you can make accounts for whoever needs them. So we don't have a limit.
Nice.
We're able to expand as much as we need to.
Great. No, thank you. I really appreciate the update here, and I'm excited about this as an enabler of a lot of interesting analysis questions moving forward. Thank you both for all of your work on this, and Gustav, certainly wish you the best out west. All right. Yeah, nothing further on my end. Quick check with Mr. Goulding. Do we have any interested members of the public? interested in speaking on this one?
There is no one signed up for public comment.
All right. There's no action requested on this item. So close out item 7 at this point. Thank you both for the presentation and update. Look forward to seeing more out of this one in the months and years to come. So thank you.
You certainly will.
All right. Director's report.
All right. So thank you very much. I will be exceedingly quick. Thanks to the voters for the approval of both the general fund bond on town meeting day, as well as the Main Street Great Streets TIF borrowing. We were pleased to see both of those paths. The challenge for staff will be building a budget now that has enough resource and staff to accomplish that higher level of work, given that the tax increase did not pass. So that is my challenge for the coming weeks. The last item, North Winooski Avenue Parking Management Plan. We went to the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee earlier this week on Monday. They recommended 2-to-1 to advance a resolution to the council this coming Monday night, thanking the Parking Management Plan Committee for their work and for proposing a path forward for the implementation of North Winooski Avenue. Basically, in short, delaying the implementation, the paving project on North Winooski Avenue by a year, and thereby giving the community and the stakeholders, the small businesses along the corridor, a year to plan for the parking adjustments that will be made along that top block of North Winooski from Union to Riverside. So happy to answer any questions on that. There'll be a full item at the council meeting this coming Monday night, and I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you for that. With that, I'll go to item 9 on the agenda, Commissioner Communications. Start with Commissioner Bose.
Nothing from me at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Kennedy.
I also have nothing.
Vice Chair O'Neill Lavaco.
Almost nothing. I just want to make sure that Holly got the notes in the chat. There was a comment from Mr. Pena, and he mischaracterized what I thought my statement was. So I just had it in the chat for the record about the pod community. So just to capture that.
I will take a look at the chat log and make sure that's in the public comment.
Okay, thank you. And then just 2 thank yous. One, I wish Jeff was still on. The signs on South Union in front of Edmonds Middle School. They're sandwich boards, I don't know what you call them, talking about, I have had kids in the Edmonds complex for so long, I don't even remember, it's over a decade. And I've had someone in the middle school for 8 years now. And so the safety on South Union Street with the buses and the bikes and the cars completely disregarding the safety of kids, those signs I think are fantastic. So kudos to Public Works on that for getting stuff done that I, as a parent, hadn't been able to. And then also thank you to staff for dealing with 12 Overlake Park and the challenges of parking for that emergency service vehicle. I really appreciate the creativity. They did come to the commission in December 2019. I know we were dealing with the pandemic, but this felt like it took a long time. So thank you. That's it.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Overby.
I just want to relay one comment that I received about concerns about the Intervale Road condition, and I was sort of looped in with a communication between somebody who was communicating with I think Assistant Engineer Norm Baldwin. And I just wanted to let the other commissioners know that there's been a big a concern about the condition of the road, which we know we've been waiting to try to get that side, the multi-use path on the side, but particularly the crossing there seems to be a disconnect in getting repairs made to the railroad crossing. And this person was saying that she was expected to call and communicate with somebody at the V-Trans about how to get that repaired. So there seems to be, the concern that I wanted to share is that there's a lot of traffic, there's large trucks that go down there and people are trying to get ready, getting their gardens going right now. And the condition of the space on either side of the railroad track seems to be the responsibility of the railroad owner. But there seems to be a lack of communication in a way that's making that repair possible. And I guess there's changes in the way that the repairs get done around railroad tracks, like at the bottom of College Street. There was those rubbery kind of crossing things to make it easier for people to bicycle across and walk across. And anyway, the concern is that there really needs to be an escalated effort made to find a way to replace these, to repair that. And the methodology is different, and apparently there's a new way to do it. And Engineer Baldwin has communicated about that. But this person was somewhat frustrated that she was being told to just contact V-Trans and see if she could get something done about it. So I'm just sharing that sense of frustration about why is it that a public citizen who's got a garden down there and who sees the road and particularly the dangerous situation at the railroad crossing, why there isn't a better way for the Public Works Department to get that worked out. So I'm sharing that with you all because I don't know if you use the gardens down there or not. But anyway, I just want people to be aware of that. And I don't know what's can be done about it other than we do a bake sale and try to buy these new concrete crossing things to fix the railroad track. If nobody's going to take responsibility for it and people need to fix it before somebody crashes their bike and is injured. So that's my comment.
All right, thank you for that, Commissioner Overby. And mine now is to echo what Vice Chair Leovanko said. Appreciate on the new signage on in front of Edmonds there. Appreciate the whole crew was out one day last week. So Rob, Jeff, Leonard, Dave, or Doug, the other gentleman's name that was out. I was running a little late to grab my kids and didn't get a chance to say hello, but I saw you there. Appreciate you're all getting eyes on the situation as well. Anyways, nothing further on my end. Close out Commissioner Communications and move to item 10, adjournment. Next meeting date, April 20th. Certainly
I'll make
entertain
a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, we have a motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second from Commissioner Bose. Is there any discussion around that motion? All right, we will go to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Good evening, all. We will see you next time.